You are Locked On Houston Cougars Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Houston on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
So close to having a show tonight where we were talking about what would have been the second best upset of the day in college football on a wild and wacky Saturday. The Houston Cougars tried their hardest to beat the Oklahoma Sooners in Norman, but they just could not pull it off. Oh, so close. And we got a lot to get to in this Locked On Coogs Postcast. I am Michael Connor. We are joined by Parker Ainsworth of Locked On Coogs as well. Today's episode, by the way, is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Parker, we didn't talk a lot before we just started this show because I felt like we just got to let it go here. Oh, my goodness. It was so close, man. You just went into Norman, and this is a team that you and I talked about last week. That was a frustrating team to watch last week. They couldn't move the football. They couldn't stop UNLV at home, and they go on the road, and they nearly pull off a massive upset.
Yeah, and it frankly, in the 2 seconds we did talk before going live tonight, it felt like a day where upsets were everywhere, and it felt like Houston was going to get to be a part of that. Did a lot of things exactly as you'd want the playbook to play out for the upset to happen. Even the time you have an interception, it doesn't necessarily come back to bite you because Oklahoma missed a field goal wide left. Great defensive performance night in Norman. I could go on and on about the thing that says about the culture being instilled, right? We're in week 2 of the Willie Fritz era. But man, at this point, there's part of that also feels like we should have done it. There's a sting still, right? We should have done it. It's a weird feeling I didn't anticipate. Yeah,
you're right. It's definitely a weird thing. It's so weird. I got this big smile on my face, and they lost. I'm like, man, that felt like a win because we talked about the line last week. What did the line end up at? You tweeted, you did. I think you sent the tweet the other day. It was 28 or something.
It was 28.5 about midweek. It might have come down to 27.5 this morning, but it was right around that.
But you covered the 27.5 or 20, whatever it was.
There were only 28 total points scored.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, think about being an Oklahoma fan tonight. They're going home thinking, oh my God, what are we about to watch all season long? They're going to go play SEC football with this? Good freaking luck.
SEC football. They got Tulane next week. That's a rough one. Man. Whew.
Yeah, you're right. The total over-under tonight was 48.5. Oh my gosh. It didn't even hit that. 27.5 was the final line. I mean, just absolutely nuts. You can't sit here and be all positive, obviously, when you lose, because you do lose a football game tonight. I guess the thing that I come back to is that clearly they're going to struggle a little bit moving the ball at times, right? I mean, I know that Donovan Smith put up better numbers tonight and made some better throws than we saw last time. I thought that they were a little too persistent on trying to pound the ball into the Oklahoma line the entire night. I don't know what you thought about that. I thought I can get that you want to be physical and establish your dominance, but it's just when you keep running into a line and not getting anything out of it, at what point do you just kind of ditch it?
The final line was 35 rushes for 58 yards. Admittedly, a couple of Donovan Smith sacks are factored in there, but it's not great, right? That's not great at running the football. Oklahoma's going to be big and stout and strong up front, but I'm like you. If you're going to focus on the offense side of the ball, because that's where I think most focus should be as far as getting better in this game. 35 carries is a lot for a game where you didn't have a whole lot going on the ground. The game was really just very conservative on offense overall. You had, Donovan Smith finished 24 of 28, but a lot of short passes. Only really aired it out a couple times, one of which was the Man-Jack touchdown. And so I think there was a lot of, if we keep this thing close, we'll have a chance. And admittedly, that is how it played out. Just at some point, you got to take that chance, right, Michael?
Yeah, you can't play, like they say, scared money doesn't make money.
Right.
And not that they were playing scared by any means, but that you're right. I think conservative is the best way to put the offensive attack tonight. And I know that the Willie Fritz, and we talked about this, last week? The Willie Fritz offense isn't like, or maybe that was on your podcast recently, which, by the way, you should be listening to the Locked on Coogs podcast every single day. It is your daily listen. I listened every day in the car last week. So
hey, there we go. There we
you
go.
go.
I got to be honest, Michael, as long as we're trading compliments here, I've enjoyed the roller coaster last 10 days of the Astros with the post-game show. So we'll go that back and forth.
Hey, yeah, they've been a roller coaster, that's for sure. And by the way, this channel, I just do want to remind everybody that listens to this, because I know that people will listen to this live and whatnot. We'll be live tomorrow after Texans when they finish their first game of the season, and then Astros tomorrow night. And then starting week 2 of the season, Wade Smith is going to do the Texans shows with me, former Texans lineman. So that's going to be very cool. We're not former Texans linemen. You're a coach. You've been a coach. I'm just a guy sitting at home now who's talked forever. But that offensive attack, I think that's the next thing that I would like to see as they move forward. Now, look, the opponent next week, and we'll talk a little bit about that game in just a bit, because I know that's a big old deal to both these fan bases, to that Rice game. But I'd like to see a more risque offense at times, like you're saying. Take some shots down the field. I don't know that necessarily Willie Fritz, that's his style all the time, but I wouldn't mind it. I think that you've shown that you can stay competitive, right? Now you got to take some chances.
Well, and, there are a handful of ranked teams in the Big 12 on your schedule, so I don't mean to downplay the conference. But theoretically, that's as good a team as anyone you're going to play this year, right? And so you've shown what your defense can do. I know Jackson Arnold's a sophomore, but he was like Gatorade's Texas high school football player of the year a couple years ago, right? Like,
terrible.
Well, and I would say some of that's being young, and some of that was they got after him. They hit him a few times. They had a couple big sacks, and he looked young. He looked really young. If Oklahoma is really a top 15 team, and they may move in the rankings with all the shakeup at the top, who knows what happens, I guess. But that's as good a team as you're going to play this year. Utah will be around there. Arizona might not be that high. Kansas might not be that high. Like you've shown your defense can do it.
Kansas is a ranked team that lost today.
So they'll probably drop some between now and I guess Houston plays them late in the season. So we'll talk about next week later, but the defense, I think, showed that you can maybe take some advantages or take some chances with your offense because you can trust those guys. Those guys played phenomenally today, and it's a shame they're not going home with a win. They played really well.
They did play really well. Let's talk about some of the improvement. I did want to have a little bit more of a discussion on Donovan Smith a little bit, because I know that we took did a little bit of a talk last week about him, about where you're at with him, and do you think that this is where you keep going? We'll talk about him in just a brief second. This is the Locked on Coogs Postcast. Michael Connor, Parker Ainsworth here with you on a Saturday night. Right now, we got to tell you about LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals, as I mentioned, you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. So you better be looking on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It is the Locked on Coogs Postcast. It was going to be such a fun Saturday night.
It was going to be so fun, Michael. It was so close.
Fun, so close.
I had receipts pulled. I was ready to roll.
Who had Oh, you know what? You're right. There were a lot of people. There was a lot of people on social media. I even said it last week, like jokingly to it. I mean, not jokingly, but not fully serious. Like, man, this is going to be bad. It's going to be a bloodbath. And I told my wife tonight, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. This is probably the one show out of all these shows I've done so far that I'm looking forward to the least because it's going to be it's just going to be horrible. And she's like, well, how are you going to pull this off? And I'm like, I don't know.
Speaking of wife conversations, we were, talking about who does bedtime, who does dinner time, whatever. And I was like, well, I got to kick off at 6:45 and watch the whole game. And she was like, well, it might be cutting it close because my wife was doing something. And I was like, you know what? If I'm logging in right at 6:45, this one could be bad early. Yeah. Well, it's okay. Like, I didn't see the beginning. And she was like, okay. And then about second quarter, I was like, hey, I'm staying up until midnight tonight. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah. We're going to party. Could be a huge.
Oh, man.
Unfortunately, just not the result that you're looking for. What was your biggest positive in terms of improvements that you had from week 1 to today?
So we could talk about the defense all night long. Donovan, I think, drew the most scrutiny last week. First team offense did not score a touchdown against UNLV. UNLV is a good group of 5 team, but not the kind of defense that's supposed to scare you like that. And I thought while the offensive play calling felt conservative and his decision-making was even a little conservative, he did a good job of not going broke taking money, right? Not just because we played Vegas last week, but he really did do a lot of the, okay, no one's open, check it down here. Let's throw the swing here. Let's take a sack instead of trying to throw it away, that kind of stuff. The criticism, I think, is that you got decent receivers out there, and he had 24 completions for 260 yards. That's not a whole lot of yards per completion. I teach history, not math. That's not a lot of yards per completion, Michael.
I don't teach either.
But I feel like at the end of the day, the next step's going to be okay. But like Boogie Johnson runs a 4.3. Let's throw it out there one time. That's the next one, right?
Yeah, because Oklahoma did feel vulnerable. I mean, throughout the entire night, because you'd have these little brief pockets and these plays. I felt like at a lot of times, everything that was kind of outside the numbers, I felt like they were getting enough cushion out there to where if they tried to push maybe a little bit outside the numbers, throwing the football, maybe they get. I don't know. It just. I to the Donovan Smith thing, like I think that it's okay to keep. I mean, I'm not saying that you're making a change or anything. You're going to keep rolling with him, but you got to get into his head. Like, okay, it's great to protect the football, and this game probably did dictate that, right? Like,
right.
This style of football was the kind of style of football you play against this opponent in their home. Because if it went bad and Oklahoma started to roll, we all know what's going to happen. Like in those moments, It starts to snowball, and then things get really bad quick. I was just watching. So my wife went to Alabama. She did not watch the game tonight because she expected an easy win, and it was tight, just like this one was the entire night. But then it snowballed at the end, and you see what happens when a team like that's playing at home, and when they get rolling, all of a sudden it's just like boom. So I think that he played within what the game was tonight. I do believe that, but if he doesn't come out and play with a little bit more, a little bit more urgency to playing down the field at times or taking the chances, and even if it's a game call type of thing, I think they'd be making a mistake next week. Go air it out a little bit. Let's see what you got.
Well, and bluntly, the next week shouldn't be the same kind of defense. You have a chance to. I will say it's interesting that you're kind of seeing such a big jump from him in week 1 to week 2. We talked a little bit last week. Locked on Coogs folks have heard me talk about it, but this is a guy that missed all of spring practice with the new staff. He had an injury and he had surgery on his shoulder in January. He played the last few games last year hurt, and you kind of wonder if there were just a lot of cobwebs on him last week or what the deal was, because bluntly, Michael, if he played this well last week, they probably win that game, right? I mean, like UNLV is not the same kind of an opponent, but if he completes 24 out of 28 passes last week, I think they're all right.
Yeah, I do too. And there was one other thing that we did not discuss when we started. I just remembered because I saw somebody tweeted me about it just a second ago, or tweeted us about it a second ago. What did you think about the safety call?
Oh, I think both calls are wrong. So there was the safety call at the end and the muffed punt early.
Muffed punt, yeah.
I think they were both wrong. I'll be honest with you, Michael, the coach in me is very much like, well, you can't blame the refs. You need to either go catch the punts or you need to, not hand the ball off there. You need to get vertical. Like the coach in me wants to fix it anyway, but I do think both calls were wrong. They both got reviewed and called stand, which means that they didn't see anything to overturn it. theoretically, that means if they'd gone to the review booth with the other call, they would have also let it stand. If Houston's got to feel they got shortchanged on both of those.
Yeah, I hated the safety call because it's complete. I get it in the moment. It's so hard to make that judgment call when that's the thing that we always do with refs or umps or whatever it is in any sport. Like, it's so quick. Their job is to be quick and to make the decisions and make the right calls in that moment. But I understand that you'll never be perfect on it. I just hate when you go to replay like that. And I don't think that, and I know it stands for a reason, but if it's something that is like inconclusive enough, why can't we just set it up and run the play again? I don't know. There's no solution.
The safety, I mean, I guess there was technically a minute left, but it's pretty easy to argue the safety decided the game.
Yeah.
It made it a touchdown, not a field goal. It meant Houston had to spend their timeouts on defense. I mean, it really did completely shift the dynamics of what felt like a winnable. I mean, it still was a winnable game. It still felt like a very winnable game with about a minute and a half to go.
Yeah, I did not like that call at all. And you know what? It's all right? I mean, like, at some point it'll level out. I'm a believer in that. Like, you got a bad one here, later in the year something else is going to happen and it'll even out for you.
Well, and what's funny is when it evens out later in the year, whether it's against Utah or whoever it happens against, we won't think about it like that at all.
You're right.
But you're right. I think it will, but we won't think about it like that.
Yeah, I really wish that that would happen. Probably in that give me the Utah game. I'll take the Utah game of all the games because that's got to be the biggest one left on the schedule. We got a little bit of time before we get there. Defensively, what stood out to you the most improvement from last week? I mean, to me, number one, you love the pressure, right? I mean, I think it's about I can go as simplistic as I can.
Yeah, 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss. I guess it remains to be seen what Oklahoma looks like in year one in the SEC. But if that's an SEC style offense, that's pretty impressive considering that that's a bunch of SEC caliber offensive linemen and so on. I know that they're first year in the SEC, and I'm sure we'll get comments about being dinged up and this, that, and the other thing about their offensive line. But like Carlos Allen at nose tackle looked good. Keith Cooper at defensive end looked good. Michael Batten at linebacker looked good. I mean, the front 7 really held their own. The secondary, with the exception of covering the tight end twice, I thought looked really good too. They lost the tight end on 2 run-first situations. Happens. You just hope it doesn't happen in a close game like that in 2 very crucial situations. On the whole, though, again, this is a team that gave up 20 points on offense to UNLV because one of those touchdowns was a defensive touchdown. 20 points to UNLV and 16 to Oklahoma. You can't, there's no way. There's just no way.
When we were on when you had me come on the podcast with you, I mean, that was one of the things we talked about, right? Is how awful they were defensively last year. The Dana Holgorsen era got really, really bad. This doesn't look that bad. You can win football games with what they're putting out defensively. I'm not crazy for saying that.
I would think that you can win a hand, especially, Price next week, other Big 12 teams down the road. There are a handful of teams that you could beat with that defensive effort and a competent offense for sure.
Yeah, I'd be shocked. This is me buying back into the optimism. I'd be shocked now if they don't pull off some wins. Last week I was completely down in the dumps. They lose by a few on the road in Norman, which, by the way, did you catch the whole – I didn't know they do the Toby Keith thing. Did you know they do that?
You're a baseball guy in the 7th inning stretch, and all, that felt a little weird. That felt a little weird.
The whole song.
The whole song. It's a long song.
It's not short. And it has nothing to do with Oklahoma. It's about America. Did he not have an Oklahoma song? R.I.P. Toby Keith, right? Pour one out for him, out of my massive jug of water. But that was just strange. Let's preview for a few minutes before we get out of here the Rice game coming up, which should be an easy victory, right? We'll talk about that here in a brief second on the Locked On Coogs Postcast. Maybe you're looking to get into the game. Well, how about this? Use the Gametime app. Go download it right now. They have you for all the big events, whether it's concerts, comedy, whatever it might be, big-time events. the Gametime app is going to get you in there every single time. They've got all-in pricing. This is something you have to toggle in the app, and when you do, it shows you the total up front. That way there's no surprise fees at checkout. Like I mentioned, you toggle that feature, you've got it right there. How about your seat views? There's nothing worse than picking out a seat and then getting there and realizing this seat isn't that great. You get the panoramic view in the app, the Gametime app, with the seat views right there. And finally, the lowest price guaranteed on Gametime, or Gametime will credit you 110% the difference. I love hearing stuff like that. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. So, this is the Locked On Coogs Postcast. Did I just spell college right? I felt like I said it really fast.
Hopefully the listener knows, right?
Yeah, if you know how to spell college, look it up. Google it. That's what I would suggest to you. I am Michael Connor. That's Parker Ainsworth. You guys need to be listening to his show all week long. The Locked On Coogs podcast is good. Look, I'm just gonna say there's not a lot of U of H coverage at times in the city of Houston. You know, you got your beat writers, and that's about it. So, honestly, you want daily stuff? The Locked On Coogs podcast is where you need to be checking it out. Where you're going to be doing plenty of previewing this week. I'm sure a lot of hate talk too. Is there a lot of smack talk between U of H and Rice these days? I know that Rice is, a little pesky over there at times, but
and they won the game last year, so I'm sure that they're feeling pretty good about it.
They smacked around Texas Southern tonight, like 69-7.
That doesn't feel right. I think that it's almost, I don't mean to say, it's almost a good thing they lost to Rice last year, because that probably aided in the firing of Dana Holgorsen and the changing of the coaches. And frankly, if you played that game tonight and didn't lose to Rice last year, you might, be sitting a little too high and mighty going into the Rice game. I don't think you can do that after they beat you last year. I guess it is also a home game. Not that either game is really that far away, I guess.
Those Rice fans, they have a hard time traveling over there.
they have a hard time traveling to home games.
I drove by their stadium. I was just down there the other day, actually. Drove right by their stadium. I didn't know they have a big, massive bubble in their parking lot now. I don't know what's going on over there.
It's Rice. It was probably some engineering student's project.
Probably.
I do think that Houston has a lot to put on the table next week. There were a lot of people after the UNLV game that saw the Rice game as like the only win they can go get this season. I don't know that I feel that way, but it certainly feels like a very gettable game. You got to think if they play as well as they did tonight, they get that game. Again, you don't want to lose to Rice twice in a row. That's pretty bad. There's all kinds of stuff like that floating around this, right?
Yeah.
I haven't looked at Rice much this year yet. I will this week, obviously, but I can't imagine they're as good as Oklahoma or UNLV. I got to be really honest.
No, so I know that they lost to Sam Houston for week 1, and like I said, they beat, I believe it was Texas Southern tonight, like 69-7. So, I mean, no offense to the Texas Southern alumni out there that may or may not be watching this show. I don't think that you're much of competition to most teams and the big boys at football. And I'm calling Rice a big boy of football. That's
you said it.
The American Athletic Conference, their own. Don't you miss that conference?
I would feel if we played a 4-point game with Oklahoma, I'd feel pretty good about the AAC right now.
You would, yeah. You'd be yelling Group of 5. Group of 5.
Get a playoff bid. Yeah, that's exactly the deal.
Don't got to worry about that anymore. Just go win some games now that you're in the Big 12. All right, before we call it a night. We guessed last week on the line. I think you were pretty close on the line.
We were saying it'd be less than 30, and like I said, I think it finished at 27.5 or so.
Yeah.
So that we were right there, and then the game was much closer than that. I'd imagine next week Houston's a favorite at home.
Yeah, there's no way they're not.
I hesitate to go big because the offenses looked bad, but maybe 8.5 points. You're looking at like, is it a 2-score game or 1-score game? I really think it's going to be low though because the offenses look pretty bad.
I was going to say 10.
All right, there you go. Well, it's 10.5 or something. Right? They're going to put an even at 10.
Yeah. 10.5. Yeah. No, please put it at even 10. Do that. I would be the worst sports book keeper ever. Like,
you'd be the first sports book to go broke.
I'm handing out lines of they're a 4-point favorite today. I would not be very good. What's on the show for everybody listening daily on the Locked On Coogs podcast this week?
We'll break this one down some. I usually rewatch the game with the results in mind on Sunday and kind of take some notes. A little bit easier to do that when you know what happens. And then we'll preview Rice. If there's any basketball recruiting news or anything like that, we'll be covering that as well. Had a handful of really good basketball players in on visits lately. Be nice if one of them committed so we could talk about them. So all that kind of stuff going on. You're doing all of Houston though. You got the Texans tomorrow, the Astros every day, right?
It's busy this week again. Texans tomorrow, Astros tomorrow, and then we got a full week of Astros other than Monday. They're off, and then same thing again next weekend. We got Coogs, we got Astros, we got Texans. Before we know it, we're gonna have the Rockets back too. So one of these days, one of these shows though, I'm going to slip up and I'm going to say the wrong show. I haven't done it yet.
So we got to talk about how we're going to do Cougar basketball and Rockets basketball. Like, how are we going to fit all that in? It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. We're definitely going to mix some Cougars basketball into the mix because if the football team doesn't win, I would like to talk about some wins at some point.
I get it.
I absolutely do. Thank you to everyone that watched tonight. Thank you if you watch this later on. We appreciate it. Do not forget to go watch Parker, listen to Parker on his Locked On Coogs podcast daily. It is as good as it gets. He's throwing up the Coug. I'll even throw it up for you too. I have no business throwing it up. I'll throw it up for you too. You guys have a great rest of your Saturday night. We'll talk more Cougs football next weekend on the Locked On Coogs Postcast.